Warren Briggs was 41 years old when his wife of 12 years handed him divorce papers, opened the front door, and kicked him out with nothing but a duffel bag. Trish kept the house, kept the savings, or what she claimed was left of it, and kicked him out like he was nothing. She had spent 14 months quietly draining their joint account into a secret life she was building with another man, certain that Warren was too passive, too predictable, too soft to ever see it coming. And for a moment, it looked like she was right. But what Trish never understood was that the quietest man in the room is not always the weakest one. Warren didn't just survive being kicked out with nothing. He built something, quietly, deliberately, the way he had always built everything. And one afternoon, while Trish was driving through an unfamiliar neighborhood, she pulled up to a stop sign and saw him, standing in the driveway of a house that dwarfed everything she kept. A Rolls-Royce parked beside him, and a woman in his arms who made her jaw go slack. Warren looked up, met her eyes, and gave her one calm nod. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from, and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The coffee was still hot. That was the detail Warren Briggs would remember later. Not the sound of Trish's heels on the hardwood. Not the way the morning light came through the kitchen window and fell across the table in clean yellow stripes. He would remember that his coffee was still hot when everything changed. He sat at the kitchen table the way he always did on Tuesday mornings. Files spread open in front of him. A red pen tucked behind his ear. His reading glasses pushed up on his nose. The project on the table was a drainage assessment for a stretch of county road outside Marietta. 60 pages of soil data, load calculations, and site photographs that most people would find deeply boring. Warren found them peaceful. Every number told the truth. Every measurement meant something. You asked the right questions, you got the right answers. Simple as that. He was a builder, had always been one. Not just in the professional sense, though he was that too. Warren Cole Briggs, licensed civil engineer, founder and principal consultant of Briggs Infrastructure Solutions, LLC. He had spent 16 years designing the things most people drove over and walked across and never thought about. Bridges, drainage systems, load-bearing roadbeds, the invisible architecture underneath daily life. His clients were municipalities and private developers who needed someone who would not cut corners, would not guess, and would not miss. Nobody called Warren Briggs twice because they had to. They called him again because he was right the first time. He reached for his mug without looking up from the drainage report. That's when he heard her. Trish's footsteps came down the stairs with a particular kind of purpose. Heels, not the flat slippers she wore on lazy mornings. He glanced up. She was dressed sharply. A fitted blazer, dark slacks, her hair pinned back in the way she wore it when she had a showing or a meeting. She was a real estate agent, so a dressed morning wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that she hadn't mentioned anything last night. No, I've got an early showing over dinner. No alarm set on her phone. He noticed. He didn't say anything. Morning, he said. She didn't answer. She moved to the counter, poured herself no coffee, and stood with her back to him for a moment. Warren watched her the way he watched a structure he wasn't sure about yet. Quietly, without judgment, just gathering information. She turned around. Something in her face was locked down tight. Not angry exactly, more like decided. In her hand was a manila envelope. She crossed the kitchen in 4 steps and set it on the table in front of him, right on top of the drainage report. The metal clasp clinked softly against the table. She crossed her arms and stood back. Warren set down his coffee. He looked at the envelope, then up at her. Her eyes were flat and steady. She wasn't nervous. She had practiced this moment. He could tell. She was ready for whatever he was going to do. He picked up the envelope, opened the clasp, and pulled out the papers inside. He read them the same way he read everything. From the beginning, without skipping, without rushing. He turned each page carefully. 12 pages total. Filed with the Fulton County Court 11 days ago. Trish had retained an attorney named Gerald Marsh. Warren had never heard of him, but the filing was clean and organized. Somebody had put real thought into it. He read every word. Trish stood there with her arms crossed, waiting for the explosion. He could feel her waiting for it. The raised voice, the slammed table, the panic. Something she could point to later. He gave her nothing. When he finished, he set the papers down flat and folded his hands on top of them. "You want the house," he said. His voice was even. "The joint savings. A portion of my consulting income. I'm entitled to all three." Her voice was practiced. "Gerald says the case is straightforward." Warren nodded slowly. He looked at her for a long moment. "Is there someone else?" She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, looked him dead in the eye and said, "No." The kitchen was very quiet. "I need 48 hours, Warren said. "Before I sign anything, I want to sit with my own attorney." Something moved across Trish's face. A brief, barely there loosening, like she'd braced for a fight and was relieved to skip it. "Fine," she said. "That's fine." She picked up her purse from the counter and walked to the door that led to the garage. She didn't say goodbye. Warren listened to the garage door open, listened to her car back out, listened to the neighborhood go quiet again. Then he sat still for a little while with his hands still folded on top of the divorce papers. He pulled the financial records that afternoon, sat down in the home office with his laptop, logged into the joint account, and navigated to the balance summary the way a man checks something he already knows and just wants confirmed. The number on the screen was not $47,000, it was $6,200. He leaned forward. He clicked on the transaction history and started scrolling. His eyes moved slowly down the screen, line by line, date by date. Every withdrawal was under the bank's standard flagging threshold, small enough to look like nothing by itself. But there were dozens of them, stretched across the last 14 months, in a pattern so deliberate and so patient that the breath left his body slowly, like air leaving a sealed room. Every transfer had gone to the same account number, one he had never seen. Warren sat very still. He didn't cry. He didn't slam the desk or stand up or make a sound. He just sat there with the screen glowing in the quiet room, looking at what 14 months of careful, calculated betrayal looked like when laid out in rows. Then he closed the laptop. He picked up his phone. He called Uncle Harold. Uncle Harold's porch light was already on. That was the first thing Warren noticed when he pulled into the driveway on Kellner Street. The warm yellow glow above the front door, steady against the dark. Harold's neighborhood was quiet at this hour. Old oak trees lined both sides of the street, their branches reaching toward each other overhead, like the vault of a cathedral. Warren sat in the truck for a moment before cutting the engine. He grabbed the duffel bag from the passenger seat and got out. Before he could knock, the door opened. Harold Briggs was 67 years old, with close-cropped silver hair, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and the calm, unhurried expression of a man who had been expecting this visit for a long time. He was still dressed. He had a dish towel folded over his shoulder, and the faint smell of reheated food drifting from somewhere behind him. He looked at Warren. He looked at the duffel bag. He stepped aside and held the door open. "I made extra," he said. They sat at Harold's kitchen table the way they had sat together 100 times before. Coffee between them, the overhead light warm and steady, the rest of the house quiet. The table was old, dark-stained oak with shallow rings from years of mugs. Warren had done homework at this table as a teenager after his father died, and Harold had quietly become the man who showed up. Warren opened his phone and pulled up the screenshots he'd taken of the account history. He laid the phone on the table and turned it toward Harold without saying anything. Harold put on his glasses. He didn't speak for almost 2 minutes. He just looked at the screen, scrolling slowly with one careful finger, his eyes moving the same way Warren's had, line by line, date by date. His expression didn't change much, just a slight tightening around the jaw. The kind of look a man gets when a number confirms something he'd hoped was wrong. He set the phone down. "How long?" Warren asked. 14 months, Harold said. "Give or take." He picked up his coffee. "These amounts? You see how they stay under 3,000 each time?" Warren nodded. "That's not careless spending." Harold's voice was measured and flat. "That's structured. Somebody knew the thresholds. They knew exactly how much to move at one time to keep the bank from generating an alert." He set his mug down. "That takes planning, Warren. That takes knowledge and patience, and a person who was thinking about this for a long time before they started." The kitchen was very still. "The account she transferred to," Warren said. "I don't recognize the number." Harold nodded slowly. He said nothing else about it that night. He didn't need to. The shape of the thing was already clear. They both understood what they were looking at. The next morning, Warren drove back to the house. Trish's car was in the driveway. He hadn't called ahead. He parked, walked to the front door, and let himself in with his key. She came around the corner from the kitchen when she heard the door, and her expression shifted fast, from surprise to something measured and composed. "I need more time," Warren said. "I'm not signing anything yet." The composure held for exactly 3 seconds. "I want you out of this house today, Warren." "Trish." "Today." Her voice was sharp now. No more practiced calm. "I've been more than patient. I'm done waiting." He looked at her. "Are you serious right now?" She walked to the front door and pulled it open. Then she stepped to the side of it, standing there like a bailiff, like she had rehearsed this part too. Warren looked at her for a long moment. Then he went upstairs. He packed a proper bag this time. Not just what fit in a duffel, clothes, his good-dress shoes, the folder of personal documents he kept in the nightstand, his father's watch from the top of the dresser. He moved through the bedroom slowly, deliberately, without slamming drawers or making statements. He took what was his and left everything else exactly where it was. When he came back downstairs, she was still at the door. He walked toward her, stopped just inside the threshold. She said, "I always knew you'd leave quietly." Warren looked at her, really looked at her, the set of her jaw, the careful stillness of her posture, the small, satisfied lift at the corner of her mouth. He read her the way he read a structure that had failed, looking for the moment it was decided. "I'm not leaving quietly, Trish," he said. "You're just not worth the noise." She closed the door. He sat in the truck in the driveway for a while. The engine was off. The street was ordinary around him, a neighbor's sprinkler running, a dog barking somewhere down the block, clouds moving slowly across a plain white sky. Then he put the truck in reverse and drove away without looking back. That night, Warren sat on the edge of the bed in Harold's spare bedroom. The room was simple and clean. A lamp on the nightstand. A window facing the oak trees. He sat with his hands laced together between his knees, looking at the floor, not thinking anything in particular, just feeling the weight of the day settle. Harold appeared in the doorway. He leaned against the frame with his arms folded, easy and unhurried, watching his nephew the way he always had, like a man who knew the difference between broken and bent. "You're not broken," Harold said quietly. "You're just at the foundation." He paused. "And you know better than anybody. Everything starts there." The office of Attorney Constance Dade was on the 14th floor of a glass building in Buckhead, and everything about it communicated the same thing: precision. No clutter, no soft edges. The desk was dark walnut, clean as a drafting table. The bookshelves behind it were organized by subject and color-coded with small tabs. On the wall to the left, a single framed document, her law degree from Emory, hung level and centered. There were no motivational quotes, No decorative plants, just clean lines and the kind of stillness that belonged to a person who did not waste space. Warren arrived 7 minutes early. He sat in the waiting area with a manila folder on his knee, printed bank records, the divorce filing, and a one-page summary he had written himself, organized chronologically. When the receptionist called his name and walked him back, Constance was already standing at the side of her desk, reviewing something on a legal pad. She looked up when he entered. She was a tall black woman in her mid-40s, with a sharp, direct gaze and the unhurried posture of someone who had heard every version of every story. She wore a charcoal blazer and small gold earrings. No wasted presentation. She shook his hand once, firm, and gestured to the chair across from her. "Mr. Briggs," she said, "tell me what you have." Warren sat down, opened the folder, and began. He didn't editorialize. He didn't explain how he felt or describe the Tuesday morning or tell her about the way Trish had stood at that door. He just walked Constance through the facts in the order they occurred. The filing, the cited balance of $47,000, the actual balance of $6,200, the 14 months of structured withdrawals, the unknown receiving account. He laid the printed records on the desk as he spoke, each page placed flat and in sequence. Constance did not look at him the way most people had looked at him this week, with that particular mixture of sympathy and alarm, like they were watching a man try not to fall. She looked at the documents. She made notes. When he finished, she picked up the bank records and read them for herself, silently, with the same careful attention Harold had given them at the kitchen table. Then she set the papers down and looked at him directly. "You brought the filing and the records the same week she served you," she said. "Yes. You haven't signed anything." "No." She made one more note. The pen moved without hurry. "Most people come in here and I spend the first hour talking them down," she said. "You're not most people." Warren said nothing. "Good," Constance said. She turned to a fresh page. "Here's what we're going to do." She filed for full financial discovery within the week. The subpoena on Trish's personal banking records went out shortly after. Constance was precise and quick, and Warren understood within the first 2 meetings that she was exactly the instrument this situation required. Not a counselor, not a handholder, but a woman who built cases the way Warren built load plans, from the foundation up, with nothing left unsupported. While they waited for the subpoenaed records to come back, Warren moved into a furnished apartment in Midtown. 10th floor, a one-bedroom with a desk by the window and a direct line of sight to the city skyline. He didn't decorate it. He didn't need to. It wasn't a home yet. It was a position, a place to work from while the larger structure took shape. He went back to work. His private consulting firm, Briggs Infrastructure Group, was still operational. Uncle Harold had recommended he incorporate it independently 3 years into the marriage, quietly, carefully, as a professional safeguard. Warren had done it without drama and without telling Trish much about it, not out of secrecy, but because she had stopped asking about his work by then and he had stopped volunteering information into the silence. The firm had 2 active municipal contracts. Both required his attention. He gave them both everything he had. He worked long hours and slept without difficulty. He didn't drink more than usual. He didn't call Trish. He went to Harold's for dinner on Sundays and came home to his apartment and sat at the desk by the window and built things on paper until the city outside went quiet. 2 weeks after the subpoena was filed, Constance called. "Come in tomorrow morning," she said. 9 o'clock. He was there at 8:52. Constance was already at her desk when he arrived. The legal pad was open. There were 2 sets of documents on the desk, the originals from Warren's file and a new set of printed records he hadn't seen before. She let him sit down and get settled before she spoke. "The account receiving your joint funds," she said, "is a joint account." Warren looked at her. "Joint between your wife and a man named Brendan Fields." The room was very still. Constance continued without pausing. the way a person delivers information that does not benefit from softening. Brendan Fields was a real estate attorney. He had drafted Trish's divorce filing. 18 months ago, 14 months before Warren had ever seen a single page of those papers, Brendan Fields and Trish had co-purchased a townhouse together. The down payment had been drawn from the account receiving the drained funds. While Warren was depositing paychecks into their joint account, Trish had been transferring his money, carefully and deliberately, into a life she was building with another man. The affair had not started when the marriage ended. The marriage had been ended so the affair could be formalized. Warren sat across from Constance and absorbed every word without expression. He looked at the records she slid across the desk. He read the name, Brendan Fields, and the account number, and the property address, and the date of purchase. He read it all the way a man reads a structural report that has just told him where the collapse originated. Then he looked up. "How clean can we make this?" he asked. Constance opened a fresh legal pad. Warren walked out of Constance's building into the mid-morning heat of Buckhead. The sun was already high and sharp, the kind of Atlanta morning that didn't ease into the day. It arrived all at once. He stood on the sidewalk outside the glass doors, pulled out his phone, and called Dominique. She picked up on the second ring. "Talk to me," she said. No hello, no preamble. That was Dominique. Warren told her everything. The account, the name, the townhouse, the dates. He kept his voice even and low, the way he always did, standing still on the sidewalk while foot traffic moved around him like water around a post. When he finished, Dominique was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Brendan Fields," she said. "You know him?" "I know of him." Her voice had a particular flatness to it, not surprise, but confirmation. The sound of a suspicion finally getting its paperwork. "I ran into his name about 8 months ago. Background check on a client referral. Nothing related to you. Something felt off. I never dug further because I didn't have a reason to." A short pause. "Now I do." "I need you to dig," Warren said. "I've been waiting for you to ask me something," she said. "I was starting to think I'd have to bring it to you uninvited. How long have you been watching this?" "Long enough to know Trish didn't come up with this by herself." Her tone didn't shift. It stayed flat, professional, with that undercurrent of loyalty she never performed but always demonstrated. "Give me 2 weeks." Warren said he would. He thanked her. She told him not to thank her and hung up. He stood there another moment, then put his phone away and walked to his car. The months that followed were not dramatic. They were grinding and slow and procedural in the way that legal battles always are when the other side has prepared carefully and believes they are winning. Trish's legal team came in hard. They pushed for the full asset division she had planned. The house, the joint account balance as she had cited it, a percentage of Warren's consulting income going forward. They filed motions and counter-filings and presented Trish as a wife who had contributed substantially to the household and was entitled to her share of a life she had helped build. Constance did not blink. She introduced the fraudulent fund transfers in discovery with the kind of organized, documented precision that was difficult to argue against in a room where everything had to be proven on paper. The records showed exactly what they showed. 14 months of deliberate, structured withdrawals from a marital joint account, transferred to an account co-held with a man Trish had claimed not to know romantically. The down payment on the townhouse. The dates, the amounts, all of it clean, documented and damning. Trish's claims did not collapse all at once. They weakened the way a structure weakens under load, gradually, then decisively. By the 3rd month of proceedings, her legal team had shifted from aggressive to defensive. By the 5th month, they were negotiating. Warren said very little throughout. He showed up when Constance required him, answered questions precisely, and let her do the work she was built for. In the hallways outside the hearing rooms, he did not look at Trish with anger. He did not look at her with longing. He looked at her the way he looked at a project that had gone over budget and off-spec, with clear eyes and the focused attention of a man who was already calculating what came next. She looked back at him like she was searching for the version of him she expected to find. The one who would be diminished by this, the one she had planned for. She didn't find him. Outside the hearing rooms and away from Constance's office, Warren worked. He had dinner at Harold's every Sunday. Harold cooked, asked practical questions, and did not offer more comfort than Warren needed. They talked about the business, about contracts, about the city's infrastructure budget cycle, and where the opportunities were lining up. Harold had a way of steering conversation toward the future with such consistency that being around him made the past feel like something you'd already filed correctly. In the 6th month of proceedings, Briggs Infrastructure Group was awarded a municipal contract that was the largest in the firm's short history. A drainage and road foundation project covering 3 city blocks in a southwest Atlanta neighborhood that had been flooding during heavy rain for years. It was the kind of contract that warranted a press release, a celebration, maybe a dinner with the team. Warren told no one outside of Harold and the 2 engineers on his staff. He signed the contract, filed the paperwork, and went back to work. The consulting firm grew quietly, the way everything he built grew, without announcement, without performance, without anyone watching who wasn't supposed to be there. The divorce was finalized on a Thursday morning in October. It was not the settlement Trish had designed. It was not the financial demolition she had spent 14 months engineering. Constance had built the case too carefully for that. Warren did not walk away with everything. He hadn't expected to. But what he walked away with was solid ground. Enough. More than enough to build from. He signed the final papers in Constance's office, at the same dark walnut desk where they had first sat together. Constance handed him the pen without ceremony. He signed where she indicated, read each page before he did, and handed the folder back to her when it was done. He stood up and extended his hand. She shook it once, firm, the same way she had the first day. "You were easy to work with," she said. "So were you," he said. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, nodded once, and walked out. Outside, Atlanta was fully into autumn. The air had finally broken, cooler and clean, the light coming in at that low, golden October angle that made the city look like it was lit from somewhere deliberate. Warren walked out of the building and onto the sidewalk and stopped. He stood there for a moment. Just a moment. The traffic moved past him. Somewhere up the block, someone was laughing. The city went on exactly as it always did. Indifferent and alive. Full of people building things and breaking things and starting over. Warren straightened his jacket. Then he walked to his car. The meeting was held in a conference room on the 4th floor of a city planning building downtown. One of those government spaces that tried hard with new carpet and a projector screen, but still smelled faintly of old paper and recycled air. Warren arrived 7 minutes early with a printed copy of his report and a laptop. He sat up quietly at one end of the long table and watched the room fill. City planners, a deputy commissioner, 3 developers in dark suits who sat together and checked their phones. 2 architects Warren didn't recognize. A woman from the zoning board who seemed to already disagree with everything before anyone had spoken. The meeting started at 9. Warren presented first. He walked through the infrastructure findings the same way he always did, without slides full of noise, without overselling, without performing enthusiasm for people who had already read the summary. He pointed to what the data showed. He explained what it meant for the proposed development corridor. He answered 2 questions from the planners, one from the deputy commissioner, and sat back down. Then Adaeze Okonkwo stood up. Warren noticed her before she spoke. She had been sitting across the table and slightly to his left, and she had been paying close attention, not taking notes, but listening in that particular way that meant she was already thinking 2 steps ahead of whatever was being said. She was sharp-featured and still, with the kind of presence that didn't announce itself, but simply occupied the room. When she stood, she didn't reach for notes. She spoke about the mixed-use development proposal from memory, with the precision of someone who had been living inside the problem for months. She argued for a design approach that centered walkable density in the Eastern Corridor, which happened to be exactly what Warren's report had flagged as the highest yield structural opportunity in the entire project zone. She used language that was architectural, but she translated it as she went, making sure the planners and the deputy commissioner were following without condescending to them. She pushed back on a cost objection from one of the developers with a number she pulled from memory without blinking. She was good. She was genuinely, specifically good. Warren found himself leaning forward slightly without meaning to. The meeting broke at 11:15. People gathered laptops and coffee cups and split into smaller clusters of conversation. Warren packed his bag, then crossed the room. "Ms. Okonkwo." She turned. Up close, she was maybe 5'6", in a tailored dark green blazer, and she looked at him with the direct, assessing calm of someone who had been looked past in enough rooms to have stopped giving people the benefit of the doubt. "Your presentation," Warren said. "The Eastern Corridor argument. That was the right call." She studied him for exactly one beat. "Your infrastructure report supported it," she said. "Eventually. It supported it throughout. It supported it in footnote 14, she said. "You buried the best recommendation in the report in a footnote." She tilted her head slightly. "Why?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. Then he laughed, a full, real, completely unguarded laugh that came from somewhere he hadn't visited in a long time. The sound surprised even him. She watched him with something that was almost amusement. "That's not a denial." "No," he said, still recovering. "It's not." He shook his head. "I didn't want to overreach. The footnote was a flag. I expected someone to find it." "Someone did," she said, and extended her hand. "Ada Okonkwo. Warren Briggs." They shook. Her grip was firm and brief, and she didn't make a thing of it. They ended up talking in the hallway for 20 minutes. It started as a professional debrief. The Eastern Corridor, the drainage concerns, how the zoning board's objections could be addressed with a phased approach, and became something else, gradually, without either of them steering it there. At some point, Warren mentioned that he was recently divorced. He didn't know exactly why he said it. It felt like information she should have if they were going to talk like this. Ada's expression didn't change. She nodded once. "Okay," she said. "Then, I want to be straightforward with you. I have zero interest in being anyone's rebound." "That's fair," he said. "It's not a judgment," she said. "It's just who I am. I don't do placeholder." "Neither do I," he said. She looked at him a moment longer, then reached into her portfolio case and produced a business card. He took it and handed her one of his. She glanced at it, tucked it away, and told him her firm would be in touch regarding the zoning collaboration. He said he looked forward to it. They walked toward separate elevators. Their firms began collaborating on the zoning project 3 weeks later. Email became a phone call. A phone call became coffee in the lobby of a building they were both presenting at. Coffee became dinner at a quiet place in Ponce City Market that Ada chose and Warren was 10 minutes early for. Then, a second dinner. The dinners were easy, unhurried. Ada asked about his work, not politely, but with actual curiosity, the kind that pushed back when she disagreed and went quiet when she was genuinely thinking. She challenged his assumptions about the Southwest Corridor project and was right often enough that he stopped being surprised by it. She talked about her own firm with the directness of someone who had built something real and didn't need to perform modesty about it. She never once made him feel small. Several months after that first meeting, they were at a rooftop restaurant in Midtown. A warm evening, the Atlanta skyline spread out behind her, the air finally carrying a hint of summer's end. Ada swirled what was left of her wine and looked at him across the table. "What are you working toward?" she asked. Not what are you building? What are you working toward? The distinction was intentional. He knew that about her by now. Warren thought about it for exactly as long as it deserved. A foundation nobody can touch, he said. Ada looked at him steadily for a moment. Then she lifted her glass. He touched his to hers. Dominique texted on a Thursday evening. 3 words. Need to meet. No explanation. No follow-up. Just the text and then silence, which meant she had something real. Warren replied, Come here. I'll be home. She arrived at his midtown apartment at 7:15, with a manila folder tucked under one arm and a paper bag with 2 containers of jerk chicken from the place on Peachtree she'd been going to since they were teenagers. She set the food on the counter without comment. Then she set the folder on the kitchen table and sat down across from him. No small talk, no preamble. That was Dominique. She opened the folder and turned the first page to face him. Brendan Fields, she said. Read. Warren read. The first section was a name he didn't recognize. Paulette Mercer, 41, currently residing in Decatur. Former wife of a software executive named Gary Mercer, from whom she divorced approximately 3 years ago. The attorney who helped her structure the divorce filing, who advised her on asset strategy, who positioned her for the most favorable outcome, was Brendan Fields. After the divorce, Brendan entered into a relationship with Paulette. Warren kept reading. 14 months into that relationship, Paulette had signed a power of attorney at Brendan's recommendation, a document he described as a formality for managing a property refinancing. What it actually authorized was the transfer of 2 jointly held real estate assets out of her name. By the time Paulette understood what she had signed, the transfers were complete. Brendan had used the properties as collateral for a private loan. Paulette had nothing. She had been in active civil litigation for 11 months, trying to recover what she lost. Warren set the page down. She's still in court? He said. Still in court, Dominique confirmed. Her attorney filed last year. Discovery is ongoing. She paused. She didn't know she wasn't the first. Warren looked at her. Trish is the second, Dominique said. That we know of. He sat with that for a moment, the full shape of it. Brendan had not fallen into something with Trish. He had moved into her the way he moved into everything, the way a man moves into a house he has already decided to take. He had identified her. He had made himself useful to her. He had waited until she did his work for him, until she burned her own marriage down, and handed him the ashes to build on. She doesn't know, Warren said. It wasn't a question. No, Dominique said. She thinks she's the one who made the moves. She folded her hands on the table. She's not the architect, Warren. She's the material. He didn't say anything for a moment. He looked down at the page. Thought about Trish standing at that front door with her arms crossed, absolutely certain she was in control of every variable. Thought about the Tuesday morning she dropped that envelope on the table like she was placing a final stone. She had handed herself to a predator and called it freedom. It was the saddest thing he had heard in a long time. Dominique flipped to the second section of the folder. There's more, she said. The townhouse that Brendan and Trish had purchased together, the one funded in part with money drained from Warren's joint account, had a more complicated financial history than just that. Dominique had traced 3 of Brendan's recent real estate transactions, including the townhouse, through property records, bank filings, and a source she didn't name. What she found was a pattern of overbilling. Brendan had been inflating client invoices for years, small amounts, methodical increments, and routing the excess into accounts that fed his private investments. Real estate acquisitions, primarily. The kind of transactions that looked clean from the outside because the money entered through a legitimate legal billing system before it was redirected. No client had ever caught it fully. Not because it was perfectly hidden, but because no client had ever filed a coordinated complaint with enough documentation to force a real investigation. The Georgia Bar Association had received individual grievances about Brendan before, 3, across 6 years, but each one had been reviewed in isolation and dismissed as a billing dispute. No one had ever put all of it together in one place. Dominique patted the folder. "Until now," she said. Warren looked at the documents in front of him. Years of it. Methodical, patient, utterly deliberate. Brendan Fields had built a career on other people's trust and spent that entire career quietly picking their pockets. He sat back. He did not feel the satisfaction he might have expected. What he felt was something more like clarity, the kind that comes when a structural diagram finally resolves and you can see exactly where the load has been going and why everything downstream failed the way it did. "Keep this file safe," he said. "Make copies. Keep them somewhere separate." Dominique nodded. She already had. He stood, picked up his phone, and walked to the window. Constance Dade answered on the second ring. "Warren, I need a referral," he said. "Civil litigation. Someone who handles attorney misconduct cases." There was a brief pause on the line. Constance asked no questions. "I have a name," she said. The civil litigation attorney Constance referred was named Sharon Fitch. Her office was on the 14th floor of a building in Buckhead, clean and spare, the kind of space that communicated competence without trying to impress anyone. She was in her mid-50s, dark-skinned, with reading glasses pushed up on her head, and a handshake that meant business. Warren liked her immediately. He sat across from her desk and laid out what Dominique had found: the pattern, the power of attorney, the property transfers, Paulette's 11 months in court already. Sharon listened without interrupting. She asked 3 precise questions when he finished. Then she said, "If Paulette is willing, this case gets significantly stronger with what you've described." "She doesn't know I exist," Warren said. "I'd like to keep it that way." Sharon looked at him steadily. "You want to fund the retainer through a third party," he said, quietly. She nodded once. "I can work with that." He had the third party set up within a week. A separate LLC, dormant, with no visible connection to his name or his firm. The retainer moved through it cleanly. Paulette Mercer got a call from Sharon Fitch's office saying a donor wished to cover her initial legal costs. Paulette, who had been fighting alone and running low, said yes before Sharon finished the sentence. The civil suit against Brendan Fields was refiled and expanded 10 days later. It was public record the moment it hit the docket. The bar package took Warren 4 evenings to assemble. He worked at his kitchen table with Dominique's documents spread in front of him: invoices, bank routing records, property filings, the 3 prior bar grievances that had each been dismissed in isolation. He organized everything chronologically. He cross-referenced amounts. He built a clear, readable timeline that connected the overbilling to the private investment accounts to the real estate acquisitions. He wrote nothing himself, no cover letter, no commentary. He let the documents speak. He printed 2 clean copies, packaged one, and sealed it. He addressed it to the Georgia Bar Association's Ethics Division. No return address. He drove to a FedEx location in a neighborhood he rarely visited and sent it from there. He told no one except Uncle Harold and Dominique. Uncle Harold sat with it quietly when Warren told him. Then he said, "You didn't destroy anything, son. You just made sure the weight landed where it belonged." He poured Warren a second cup of coffee and didn't say another word about it. Dominique's response was simpler. She looked at Warren across the kitchen table, pressed her lips together to keep from smiling too wide, and said, "Good." Trish called on a Wednesday morning. Warren was in his car leaving a site meeting when her name appeared on the dash screen. He looked at it for 1 full second before he answered. "Warren." Her voice was careful, warm in that particular way that meant she had rehearsed it. "I know it's been a while. I think it would be good for us to close things properly. No lawyers, just coffee." He merged onto the highway. "Sure," he said. "Send me a time." He called Uncle Harold that night. Harold listened and said, "She's not reaching out because she's at peace. She wants to see what she can still see." Then he said, "Don't give her anything to hold." Dominique was more direct. "She's fishing, Warren. She drove past that house. She knows something shifted. She wants to know how much." Warren said, "I know." They met at a cafe in Midtown on Friday at 11. Trish was already seated when he arrived. Navy dress, gold earrings, the particular brand of effortful casualness that meant she had put 40 minutes into looking like she hadn't. She smiled when she saw him. Full, warm, practiced. "You look good," she said. "You too," he said, and sat down. She asked about his work with the gentle, curious tone of someone who had never once asked about his work when it counted. He told her things that were true and meaningless. A project timeline, a city contract, the general shape of a busy quarter. Nothing she could use. She nodded like she understood any of it. Then she said, leaning forward slightly, "I hear your firm has been doing really well." "It's been a good year," he said. She smiled. "I always knew you had it in you." He looked at her evenly. Let that sit exactly where she left it. Then he said pleasantly, "How's Brendan?" A small hesitation, just a fraction. "Good," she said. "Really good, actually." Warren nodded. "Glad to hear it." He picked up his cup. He should make sure he has his own attorney, though. Not someone from his network, someone independent. Property disputes get complicated when they cross state lines. Trish went still. "Just something to keep in mind," Warren said. He drained the last of his coffee, set the cup down, and picked up the check before she could reach for it. He left a clean tip and stood. "Good to see you, Trish," he said. He walked out. She did not call after him. He could picture her sitting there after he left. The cafe noise around her, her coffee going cold, turning his last sentence over in her hands and trying to figure out what it opened and what it closed. That evening he was at Ada's apartment, sitting at her kitchen counter while she stood at the stove. The smell of rice and pepper filled the room. She glanced over her shoulder. How'd it go? Warren rested his arms on the counter. "She's not the danger anymore," he said. "She's just someone who made a choice." Ada nodded and turned back to the stove. They ate. The 2 municipal contracts came in 6 weeks apart. The first was a stormwater infrastructure overhaul for a county outside Atlanta. 18 months of work, the kind of project that required a firm with Warren's specific combination of engineering credentials and independent consulting capacity. The second was a transit corridor assessment for the city itself. Bigger, longer, the kind of contract that changed what a firm looked like on paper and what a man looked like in a room. Warren did not celebrate loudly. He called Uncle Harold. He told Ada over dinner, matter-of-factly, the way he told her most things. She set down her fork, looked at him across the table, and said, "Warren, that's enormous." He smiled. She reached over and squeezed his hand once, and that was enough. He started looking at properties quietly, the way he did everything. No real estate agent at first, just him, driving on weekends, getting a feel for neighborhoods the way he got a feel for sites. He knew what he was looking for. He had known for a while. He found the house on a Tuesday, corner lot, 2 zip codes north of the house Trish kept. The structure was a Craftsman, wide-fronted, solid-boned, with a 3-car garage set back from the main facade and a long driveway that curved slightly before reaching the door. The yard was deep and landscaped, and the back porch looked out over a half-acre that was mostly mature trees and flat, open ground. The house was 6 bedrooms. It needed renovation. The bones were right. He bought it. He designed the renovation himself. Every room was intentional. The kitchen opened wide into a great room with high ceilings and clean sight lines, the kind of space that felt generous rather than showy. The master suite was quiet and well-proportioned. The home office had east-facing windows and built-in shelving he spec'd himself. The back porch got wide plank flooring and deep-set roof overhangs so it could be used in the rain. It took 4 months. Ada came with him to walk the site on weekends when she could, reviewing his decisions the way she reviewed any architectural project, which meant asking hard questions and not accepting answers that didn't hold up. She challenged his window placement in the second-floor guest room. She was right. He adjusted the plans. She never once told him what the house should mean to him. She never treated it as a symbol or a statement. She treated it as a structure that deserved to be done correctly, and that was one of the reasons Warren loved her. The Saturday after the renovation finished, they walked through the whole house together. Ada moved from room to room with the careful attention of someone who understood what thoughtful construction actually cost, not just in money, but in decision-making, in restraint, in the 1,000 small choices that added up to something that either worked or didn't. She said very little for the first 20 minutes. That, Warren had learned, meant she approved. Then she opened the door to the master closet. She stood in the doorway and looked at the square footage in silence for a moment. Warren, yeah, this closet is bigger than my first apartment. He laughed. It fits the room. It fits a family of 4 and their luggage, she said. She turned and looked at him with one eyebrow raised and a smile pulling at the corner of her mouth. I'm just saying. They walked out through the front door and onto the driveway, still laughing. The afternoon was clear and warm, the kind of Atlanta day that remembered summer without committing to it. The Rolls-Royce Ghost sat at the end of the driveway, pearl white, low and composed, sitting the way a well-built thing sits when it has nothing to prove. Warren had picked it up 3 weeks earlier, not to be seen in it, not to park it somewhere Trish would notice, because he had spent 12 years making himself smaller than he was, and he was done with that. The car was simply the clearest way he knew to say so to himself. Ada leaned into him. He put his arm around her and pulled her close, and she tipped her head back, saying something that made him laugh. Fully, completely. The sound of a man who had stopped calculating whether joy was appropriate. The car at the stop sign registered at the edge of his vision first. It had slowed more than a stop sign required. He looked up. Trish. Behind the wheel, GPS still glowing on her dashboard, the address of a stranger's house on the screen. She had not moved when the sign cleared. She was looking at him, then at Ada in his arms, then at the Rolls-Royce gleaming at the end of his driveway, then up at the house, the wide craftsman facade, the 3-car garage, the landscaped corner lot that made the house she'd fought to keep look like a footnote. Warren looked at her. He gave her one nod, calm, unhurried, the nod of a man with nowhere to be and nothing to explain. Then he turned back to Ada. A car horn sounded from behind Trish's car, once, short, impatient. She drove away. She pulled into a parking lot 2 blocks away and sat with the engine running. The GPS recalculated. She ignored it. She stared at the windshield and thought about the house, the sheer size of it, the corner lot, the garage. She thought about the Rolls-Royce sitting in that driveway the way a man's shoes sit by his own front door, like it belonged there, like it had always been there, like it was never going anywhere. She thought about the woman wrapped in Warren's arms, the easy way she fit there, the way neither of them had been performing anything for anyone. And then there was the laugh. She had heard it through her closed window as she sat at the stop sign. Full and unguarded, the sound of a man with nothing held back. She could not remember that laugh. 12 years, and she could not place a single moment when Warren had laughed like that. The Georgia Bar Association sent Brendan Fields a formal notice on a Thursday morning. Warren learned about it from Dominique, who had been watching Brendan's professional profile the way a careful person watches a crack in a wall, quietly, consistently, waiting for the moment it spread. The notice meant the ethics division had reviewed the package. It meant the documentation was sufficient. It meant the process had started. And once that kind of process started, it did not stop on its own. Brendan's law license was suspended pending review the following week. Paulette's civil suit hit the public record the same day. Two of Brendan's former clients, men who had paid his overbilled invoices for years and said nothing because they didn't know there was anything to say, read Paulette's filing and recognized the pattern in their own paperwork. Both contacted the bar within 10 days of each other. 3 complaints, 1 suspension, 1 civil suit. And the documentation package, sitting in the Ethics Division's files, organized so clearly that a first-year investigator could follow it without asking a single question. Warren did not celebrate. He noted it. He moved on. Brendan listed the townhouse for sale in the middle of all of it, a move that read, to anyone watching, like a man trying to convert a burning asset into cash before the fire reached him. The title company caught it before the listing had been active 2 weeks. The down payment, traced through account records during the discovery process, led back to the joint account Warren and Trish had held during the marriage. The same account Trish had drained in careful increments over 14 months. The same account whose withdrawal history Constance Dade had subpoenaed and documented and used to fight the divorce settlement. The title company flagged the transfer as potentially fraudulent. The sale was frozen. Brendan's response was quick and predictable and stupid. He transferred the townhouse into Trish's name alone. On paper, it looked like generosity. In practice, it was a man dropping a lit match and stepping back. The transfer didn't distance him from the fraud. It handed Trish sole ownership of a property, funded with money she had stolen from a joint marital account. She was no longer just a wife who had made some poor choices. She was now the sole holder of fraudulently funded real estate, with her name on every document, and investigators who were already looking. The phone call from her attorney came within 48 hours. Trish hired the attorney herself. That part, at least, she got right. She found a woman named Sandra Pruitt, sharp, experienced, not connected to Brendan in any professional capacity. Sandra looked at the full picture in their first meeting and told Trish plainly that cooperation was her only viable path away from a co-conspirator charge. Trish cooperated. She answered questions. She provided records. She gave them everything they needed about Brendan's structure and his methods and the account she had not fully understood she was building with stolen money. She lost the townhouse entirely. She kept the house, the one from the divorce settlement, the one Warren had walked out of with a duffel bag, while Trish stood at the open door. She kept it, but it sat around her now like a room she had renovated for someone else's life. Her income, without Brendan's resources threaded through it, could not carry the mortgage the way she had planned. She was not destitute, but she was smaller than she had built herself to be. Quietly, measurably smaller. Beverly Holloway called Warren on a Wednesday evening. He saw the name on his phone and answered on the second ring. Her voice was careful. She did not say much directly. She was a proud woman and did not know how to ask what she wanted to ask. She said she had heard through family that things were difficult for Trish, that there was some trouble, that things were not what they were supposed to be. Warren listened. He did not confirm or explain or fill in any gaps. When she finished, he said quietly, "Make sure she has good people around her, Ms. Beverly." Beverly was silent for a moment, the kind of silence that meant something was being considered rather than avoided. Then she said, "Warren, you were always too good for foolishness." He thanked her. He told her to take care of herself. He meant it. Trish appeared at his office on a Friday afternoon without calling ahead. His assistant looked uncertain when she announced herself. Warren said to send her in. She sat down across from his desk. He had seen Trish composed under pressure more times than he could count. She was a woman who could hold herself together in almost any situation. But she was not composed now. She was not crying. She was something worse than crying. She was fractured. The kind of fractured that happens when the structure a person has been holding together finally runs out of places to brace itself. She looked at him and said, I know you did this. Warren held her gaze. His voice was even. I didn't do anything to you, Trish. I just stopped protecting you from the things you did. Her jaw tightened. He stood. Get an attorney. One you found yourself. She left. In the elevator, alone, she finally cried. Warren walked back to his desk, sat down, and picked up his phone. He typed 2 words to Ada. It's done. Her reply came back in under a minute. Dinner at 7. I'm making jollof. He set the phone down on his desk, and he smiled. The smell hit you before you even reached the front door. Gumbo on one side, pepper soup on the other. Rich, competing, neither one willing to give an inch. From the driveway, if you stood still long enough, you could almost hear the argument happening in the kitchen. The same argument that happened every Sunday. The one Uncle Harold always started, and Ada always finished, and that Warren had long since stopped trying to referee. He had learned to simply eat both. Harold's car, a burgundy Buick he had owned for 11 years and refused to replace, sat parked beside Ada's white SUV. The Rolls-Royce Ghost was at the end of the driveway, sitting in the afternoon light the way it always sat, unhurried, certain of itself, like it had always been there, and always would be. The Craftsman house behind it filled the corner lot, the way Warren had always intended it to, wide across the front, deep in the back, the kind of house that didn't need to announce itself because its presence did that on its own. Inside, the housewarming was a belated one. Ada had moved in 7 months ago, officially, though she had been spending more nights than not for months before that. Her architectural drawings were framed in the hallway now, not as decoration, but because Warren had asked to hang them and she had let him, which was its own kind of statement. Their firms had formally collaborated on 2 city development projects in the past year. The second one, a mixed-use corridor in southwest Atlanta, had won a regional planning award that sat on the shelf in Warren's home office between his engineering certifications and a photograph of him and Uncle Harold at a job site 15 years ago. Dominique arrived at 4 o'clock with a bottle of champagne under her arm and an envelope in her hand. She handed the champagne to Ada without ceremony and the envelope to Warren with a look that said everything before he even opened it. He opened it. Inside was a card. No signature, no flourish. 3 words, written in Dominique's precise, no-nonsense handwriting. I told you. Warren laughed. A full, unguarded laugh that came up from somewhere deep. He held the card up so Ada could see it from across the room. Ada read it, looked at Dominique, and shook her head slowly. You are something else. I am consistent, Dominique said. Which is different. Harold emerged from the kitchen at that moment with a wooden spoon in his hand and gumbo on his apron, looked at all 3 of them and said, Whatever y'all are celebrating out here, come do it over a bowl. The rue didn't take all afternoon to be ignored. Brendan Fields was facing criminal charges. The referral from the Bar Association's Ethics Division to the State Attorney General's office had taken 4 months to produce an indictment, but it had produced one. Client fund fraud. Misappropriation. The overbilled accounts, documented so clearly in the package Warren had assembled, had given investigators everything they needed to work backward through years of transactions. 2 of his former clients had agreed to testify. He was no longer practicing law. His license, suspended first, then revoked, was gone. The Polish was gone with it. The tailored suits, the authoritative voice, the practiced way he occupied a room as though the room had been waiting for him. All of it required a platform. He no longer had one. He was simply a man who had spent his career building on other people's foundations, and had none of his own left to stand on. Warren knew this the way he knew most things now, through Dominique, through Constance, through the quiet channels that carried information to people who had been paying attention. He did not dwell on it. It was simply a fact about the world, the way gravity was a fact. Brendan had built wrong. The structure had failed. That was the whole of it. He had heard about Trish through Marcus Webb, a mutual contact from their old neighborhood who mentioned it without drama over the phone one afternoon. She had sold the house. The mortgage had become unmanageable on her income alone, without Brendan's money threaded through the budget the way it had been. She was in an apartment now, across town. Smaller, quieter. A job that paid the bills without matching the life she had mapped out for herself. Marcus said it, the way people say things they think will land harder than they do. Warren said, "I hope she's doing all right." He meant it in the way you mean something when it no longer costs you anything. He did not think about her much. That was the part that had surprised him at first, how completely she had simply stopped occupying space in his mind. Not through effort, not through discipline, just through the natural displacement of a life filled with things that mattered. There was no room left for the ghost of a marriage that had never been what he thought it was. That absence, he had come to understand, was the most complete victory available to a man. Not the house, not the car, not the contracts, or the award on the shelf, or the look on Trish's face at that stop sign. Simply not thinking about her anymore. Late that night, the house was quiet. Harold had gone home after 2 bowls of each dish, and a declared truce that fooled no one. Dominique had left with the rest of the champagne and a promise to text when she got in. Ada had disappeared upstairs an hour ago, saying she was going to read, which Warren knew meant she would be asleep in 20 minutes. He was in his home office. The desk lamp was on. Project plans spread in front of him. A new infrastructure proposal, a bridge rehabilitation contract, work that was his in a way nothing had ever been his before. Built under his name. Built on his terms. Built from the ground up. The house was still around him. The real, permanent kind of still that only happens when a place has been filled with the right people for long enough that their absence in a given moment doesn't feel like emptiness. It feels like rest. He heard the soft sound of footsteps in the hall. Ada appeared in the doorway in her robe, a coffee mug held in both hands, her face carrying the unhurried expression of a woman who has nowhere else she would rather be. She leaned against the doorframe and looked at him. "You coming to bed?" Warren looked at her. He thought about a Tuesday morning, a kitchen table, a manila envelope dropped in front of a man who had been reading blueprints over coffee. He thought about the withdrawal history on a screen, about a duffel bag on a passenger seat, about a front door closing behind him, and the sound it made, final, clean, the sound of one life ending so another could begin. He thought about Uncle Harold's spare bedroom, and the edge of a bed and 2 hands laced together, and a man in a doorway who said, "You're not broken. You're just at the foundation." He looked at the plans on his desk. He closed his laptop. "Yeah," he said. "I'm done. I hope you enjoyed that one." Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.